Hey everybody, it's Shelby from Stang Books, and it is time for my week in review. This will be the week of the 22nd of October through the 28th of October. And as per usual, I read a ton of books. I think I'm at 8 books this week. I managed to fit them in amidst finally kind of starting to settle into a schedule with work, which has been a lot of closing and a lot of late nights lately. But let's just get started. We'll dive right into my books. We'll try and get through these as quickly as possible because I need a nap. I got home at 5 a.m. and I'm up, I'm functioning, but an afternoon nap today is not going to be a bad thing. First up this week, I read Bones by Eli Easton, Jamie Fessenden, Kim Fielding, and B.J. Thomas. This is the second in the Gothica series. It is an anthology of some sort of Gothic or horror style. This book was absolutely wonderful. I did give it 4 stars overall. The theme with this book was voodoo. So each of the stories related to some interpretation of voodoo as a religion and a culture. I enjoyed all the books in this anthology a lot. The first one was The Dance by Kim Fielding. I did give this one 4 stars. In this one, Bram Tillman's struggling to get over the loss of his husband, and some weird things have been happening around him. People, like, he's been run off the road and almost died a couple of times when Daniel Royer shows up, and he is a voodoo practitioner, and he tells him that he is being haunted by a ghost, essentially, and that ghost wants him dead. Really fun, really great. So in The Bird by Eli Easton, I gave also 4 stars. This was a historical. It was set in Jamaica and is our lovely upper crust British gent, Colin Hastings. He's the 3rd son of the Earl of Huntingdon, and he comes to his family's plantation to right the ship. It's basically been going into decline. And while there, he gets sucked into the native people's religion and the use of voodoo, and they use voodoo to open him up and give him his heart's desire because he saved, like, the main witch's child. Which, of course, opens him up to his feelings for his best friend back home, admitting to the feelings of romantic love towards another man. The book is about him accepting that instead of wanting to marry the girl that he's supposed to go home and marry. The Book of St. Cyprian by Jamie Fessenden. I did give this one 3.5 stars. It was my least favorite of the stories in this anthology. It's very new adult. The 2 main characters in this are probably like 19, 20 maybe, still living at home, but Alejandro Valera works in his grandmother's voodoo shop, and he is out scrounging at an estate sale, essentially, and finds this book that he recognizes what it is, but this book is not looked highly upon in the voodoo world. It's supposed to be a dangerous book of bad things, and so he sends it home to his best friend Matthew's house instead of sending it to his abuela. Matthew puts the book in the closet, but his dog tears open the box, and this pit bull ends up getting possessed by the evil spirit that was attached to the book, and funny little things happen because of it. In Uninvited by B.J. Thomas, this was my favorite book in the series. I gave it 5 stars. Taylor Dutton is a reporter, and he has always worked on kind of the soft parts of the newspaper, the feel-good stories, but he always has dreamed of being an investigative reporter. And one of his cop friends calls him in on these murders that are happening around town where people are getting sliced open and their hearts stolen. And, of course, there's a voodoo shop that's kind of under investigation because a lot of the elements tie back to voodoo. Eventually, Taylor meets Miles, who is the owner of the voodoo shop, and starts talking to him and really understanding what his religion is about, and realizes that, of course, Miles is not involved and falls for him, and together they kind of discover exactly what is going on with the mystery of who's murdering all these people. So overall, I gave the whole anthology a 4 stars because I had 2 4 stars, a 3.5, and a 5 star, so kind of melded that all together to be 4 stars overall. I really did enjoy this. It was a great October read. It fit really nicely in with kind of the Halloween feel, and I definitely will look at the next book in this Gothica series because each one has been really interesting, and I like that each book is a different focus, like theme for the group, so I'll definitely be looking forward to reading that. Book number 2 this week was Mad Lazar Mambo by Rise Ford, and I loved this book. It was fantastic. It was a 5-star read. I am in love with Rice Ford. Her writing is fantastic. She's such a wonderful, descriptive writer. And each of her books I've devoured. Well, this particular series is her urban fantasy series, and I think it's some of her best work. I just really, really love the world that she's created here. And basically, the way the world works is you had the land of the Fae and you had the human world. And the two were force merged together by some event that no one really knows what happened or how it all came to be. But it wasn't a smooth blending, and so you have areas of our current Earth that have disappeared and areas of the Feyland that disappeared, and so things aren't always necessarily where they expect them to be, but the two have kind of been force melded together, and no one kind of knows exactly how everything's been pieced together. So you've lost cities that are still being discovered. In this world, you have Kai Grayson, and now Kai is an interesting character. His real name is Chimera, and he is just that. He is an amalgamation of two different species that would never normally be together. And so the Seelie look down on him because he is Unseelie, and the Unseelie want to control him because his father basically created him in a bottle, essentially, and wants his slave back. But Kai has escaped him, and he has grown up into a strong man, and he is a stalker. And the stalkers are for hire adventurers in some way. They're bounty hunters and will go get certain things that you want of a magical nature. The nemesis of his life. Ryder is the High Lord of the Southern Rice Court, and he is establishing his court in San Diego. He wants Kai to be part of his court. He's managed to finagle things so that any contract that the Southern Rice Court wants through the stalkers, Kai is the licensed stalker to take it, which Kai hates because he feels like someone else is controlling him. And so when Ryder shows up to ask a favor of Kai and take his next contract, Kai's pissed. Ryder is concerned because the Fae are having a hard time conceiving. He's heard a rumor about a ruin found of one of the old courts from the Feylands, and that there might be some powerful magic that would help with fertility. He wants Kai to go head off and find this lost court and see what information is to be found there. Of course, the entire trek is this dangerous path, and it's not easy land to get across, and Kai is like, you're an idiot, but he doesn't have a choice, and he agrees to go. And this whole book is one massive big adventure, and it's crazy, and the tension between Kai and Ryder is insane and wonderful and just so awesome. I mean, I absolutely adore Kai and Ryder. They have the crankiest relationship, and it works. It's like you can just feel Ryder slowly breaking down Kai's mile-high walls, because the fact of the matter is, Kai's had a really rough life, and he trusts no one. And so Ryder is slowly making his way into the land of acceptable, even if Kai tries very hard not to let him. But he's very attracted to Ryder and is resisting with all of his might. So you have this great sexual tension and relationship between these two guys in the midst of mayhem and madness. I mean, you got dragons and black dogs and nightmares, and of course a murderous human or two thrown in there that are all like trying to disrupt this path, and it's just wonderful adventure, fantastic urban fantasy, and really great characters in a wonderful, enjoyable story that I just really, really loved. And I love this series, and I can't wait for the next book. I know, this one just came out, so the likelihood of getting it anytime soon is slim. But I keep waiting for any new books that Rice Ford puts out, because as a writer, I just really love her work. Up number 3 this week was Here Comes Trouble by A.E. Villa. This is the third book in the Nothing Special series. And this series focuses on a narcotics task force within the Atlanta PD. I did give this book 4 stars overall. I really did enjoy it. There are a couple things that you have to take into consideration when you're reading this series to get any enjoyment out of it. And the first of that is really that this is a completely unbelievable department, okay? They are basically given carte blanche to do whatever they want or need to get the job done. So it's kind of like the Hawaii Five-0 of the book world. The actions that they take are way over the top, are not how things would work. I mean, they use force to get confessions and that kind of thing, and it's separated out and just go, this is fiction. and this is not the way that a real police force is run, and take it for just a fun, like, film style of action, and it's entertaining. Like, it's definitely entertaining, but if you want real police work in the way that, like, you would believably think that a police force would function, this is not that at all. So in this book, you have Detective Mark Rexburg and Chris Green. They are partners. They are the enforcers of the Narcotics Task Force under their bosses, God and Day. And book 1 in the series was God and Day's story. And their job is basically to be the muscle out on the streets, tracking down leads, bringing in CIs and informants, and using force if necessary to get the information that they need. Well, in this book, both men have kind of been struggling with their attraction to each other. They've never really admitted to it, and now things have kind of come to a head. And, of course, at the same time, they are working on a drugs bust. It's this big drugs bust. But unlike the other 2 books in this series, this book focused more on the interpersonal relationships between the characters rather than on the police activity. So the other real big part of this story is that there's a kid, Curtis, who is 17, that the department met in an earlier book and have kind of adopted. His mother is very sick and dying of cancer. Chris and Mark both have a very strong relationship with him and have kind of taken him in and adopted him as a secondary son, really. Again, you have to kind of take a suspension of disbelief to buy this story, because Curtis's mother finally passes and all of a sudden Child Protective Services is involved. And it's not believable at all, and it's utilized to heighten the tension within the story without really being the way DCFS would have actually functioned. These little weird reasons that things are not quote-unquote believable are why this is only a 4-star read for me, because I really enjoyed the characterization. I enjoyed these 2 men kind of finally owning up to their feelings, and their relationship with Curtis was really lovely, and so I enjoyed those aspects of the story, and I really felt the emotions between these men. There are certain ways that things were handled that they're not believable. But they serve the story in the way that this style of story is written, so I accept the unbelievability of the police action or the way DCFS works. It is not realistic at all, but it is consistent within the way the story tells itself. So I just accept that in this series, there are going to be certain real-life elements that are going to be sacrificed in order to heighten the emotional and climactic content of the story. I will read the next book in the series. I'm enjoying the series. It's certainly not one of my favorites, but I really enjoy the books. They're really great, zone out, think about nothing but just escapism stories. Book number 4 this week was another eagerly anticipated, could not wait till I got my hands on book, and it was everything I could have wanted it to be. It totally lived up to the hype. A really great October read, and it was so wonderful, and that was Hex Maker by Jordan L. Hawk. I did give this book 5 stars. It was awesome and amazing and wonderful, and I had been anxiously awaiting it. I reviewed the previous book in the series, and I will link that video if anyone wants to check out my other review in one of my weeks in review, but this one just came out at the beginning of October, and I, of course, had to read it pretty much immediately. I mean, it's been a couple weeks delayed, but so good. I love this world. Because I went into the world a lot in that other review, I won't go into too much details, but basically this is a world where witches are partnered with familiars, and together their magic is stronger, and most witches and familiars work for the Metropolitan Witch Police, because there they are safe and the familiars are not forced to bond with a witch that is not their witch. Because while a familiar can bond with any witch, it can be force bonded, there's only one witch that their magic is really ultimately compatible. So in this story, you have Fox Shifter Malachi, who is a familiar, but he has chosen to not be part of the Metropolitan Witch Police because he grew up on the streets. He was an orphan, and one of the biggest crime rings in New York City adopted him essentially as a kid and raised him up to be a thief. He's now the premier second story man in the city and can get into anywhere. And his boss has given him this task to go to this millionaire's house and steal this one particular item. Well, of course, while he's in the building, he discovers that the millionaire has been murdered. And as he's trying to escape, the cops have already shown up and he gets trapped and held, and they think that he is the one that has murdered this guy. In walks Dr. Owen Yates. Now, Owen is a forensic hexman for the Metropolitan Witch Police. He has defied his family a little bit to work for the MWP, and his family is one of the 400 families, as they're called. He's been at a party at his mother's place just down the street and stumbles across the police showing up to this house, and so he goes in to find out what's going on and uses his magic to point out that Malachi could not have been the one that actually murdered this millionaire. In the confusion of what's going on, Malachi escapes and runs off, and Owen returns to the MWP because at this point the case is not theirs, it is being held by the regular police force. Of course, circumstances conspire to bring the two back together. Owen is actually Malachi's witch, and together they must figure out what is going on, where this murder came about, and Malachi needs reform to become part of real society and no longer be a thief. And he is torn between his loyalties to those that have always been there for him and his new witch and what that means. Of course, in this story, everything is not as easy as it seems because Owen is supposed to be leaving the MWP to get married and take his place in the family. And he is very much the right and proper and true. And Malachi is much more the shifty, conniving, work the system type, and so how they influence each other is really, really wonderful. This world is fantastic. The way magic works is brilliant. The characters are wonderful and touching and so well written. I am in love with this series. It is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely one of my favorites. I just adore the writing. I love Jordan L. Hawk and what she's put together here. It's so interesting. It's this great blend of historical context with magic that makes certain things a little bit more elevated. It's right at like 1900s kind of feel. So you have the start of like electricity and stuff, but very much still horse-drawn carriages and proper etiquette and whatnot. It's just so well blended together and creative magic and this great tension between witches and familiars and unbonded familiars and what it means and how they can protect themselves and how the upper crust society of Owen's family and whatnot looks at familiars as a secondary class versus witches as much more of an elitist kind of powerful thought. And it all comes to have a point in this story and just beautifully written and so well crafted. I love this series and I cannot wait. The next book will come out and I will devour it just as quickly. Next up, I had Some Kind of Magic by R. Cooper. It is the first book in the Beings in Love series. And this is a weird book for me because I had put it off for a really long time. It had come across my radar years ago and someone somewhere made a comment about it not being that good. And so I kind of just didn't really dive into hurry to read it, but it was an author of the month pick for my romance group, and so I needed to read this book. I was really pleasantly surprised. I did give this book 4.5 stars. It was not perfect, but really enjoyable all the same. This book is a fun urban fantasy where, again, the paranormal and fairy world has been introduced to the real world, but there's still a lot of mistrust between them. And Ray Brannigan has his work cut out for him as he's not only a police detective, but he is one of the few paranormal members of the police force. Ray Brannigan is a werewolf, and there has been a series of murders that Ray has been tracking. And it looks like something big, bad, and awful has been killing things, and they can't quite figure out what is linking these cases together. Because of this, Cal Parker, who is Ray's secret mate, Ray hasn't told anyone and has kind of been sitting in this because while werewolves mate for life, fairies don't. And Cal is a half fairy. He is all glitter, falling off his wings, confection eating, flitting from thing to thing. Fairies are rarely serious, and Cal does manage it when it comes to his work. He is a lawyer and very passionate about his work with law, but he's still a fairy and he still has his moments, and this story is really wonderful with the way that Cal flits around Ray and sits at his desk and is always kind of on the periphery of Ray's awareness because, of course, Cal wants Ray as well, and it's the two of them dancing around each other as they try and figure out exactly what's going on with these cases, and turns out that there's more to this than just a simple case of someone murdering a lot of people, and it comes back to Ray personally, and so together they have to figure out what's going on, and for Ray's sake, hope that things can be more serious between the two of them. This was a really, really interesting new world, and I really enjoyed these characters. It was fun, a little lighthearted at times, and I liked the Cal's nature of this fairy because there's part of fairy nature that Ray doesn't understand yet. So just really, really sweet, really fun, slightly different take on fairies than I've seen in most urban fantasies. Usually the fae are like strong, dark, and powerful, and in this it's much more the flighty, pretty fairy take on them. I really enjoyed this book for its lighthearted moments and its dancing around between these two who both are desperately in love with the other one and can't quite figure out how to make it all work. But it was really lighthearted and fun, and I enjoyed the reading of it. I did give it 4.5 stars. I look forward to trying more books in the series. I was pleasantly surprised by the story. Next up, I had Nuts by Alice Clayton. This was the first book in the Hudson Valley series, and I did give this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed this story. It felt like such Americana. Like, I really felt like I should be reading this over the 4th of July. In this story, Roxy Callahan is a private chef. Her whole passion, her whole life was to go to culinary school, which she has done. She has been living in Hollywood for a number of years, taking care of individual clients and cooking for them. Right as things are kind of becoming difficult in Hollywood, her mother calls. And her mom is a total hippie, have fun, do what she wants character, and she has, with her aunt, gotten accepted to be on The Amazing Race, and she needs Roxy to drop everything, come home, and run the family diner. Of course, Roxy doesn't want to do it. She hates her hometown. She wants nothing to do with going back to New York and upstate New York in this tiny little town, but gets guilted into it and agrees. So she goes home, takes over the diner, and is stuck in small town America over the summer. The one bright point on her horizon is the beautiful man who stumbles into the family diner, bringing them a order of nuts. Turns out that Leo Maxwell is the son of the Maxwell family, who owns a huge estate in this area of New York. Turns out he has kind of left the family's banking business and decided to come back to the area and restart the local farm, and has now turned it into this really prosperous organic farm, has opened it up to the public and the locals. He is very heavily involved in the sustainable slow food movement. This story is 100% traditional boy meets girl romance, and yet it is how it is done best. You really enjoyed the character of Roxy and the character of Leo as they danced around each other and were both attracted to each other in this small town where everyone knows everybody's news and gossip, and as soon as something happens, you're spun right back into it. And it's Roxy dealing with coming home and realizing that her high school memory of a place is not really what that place is, and finding her own space within that world, falling for Leo and Leo for her, and what they can mean to each other in the midst of cooking and small town politics and silliness going on, and a diner that is the hub of all local gossip. And just a really, really beautiful interlacing of food and cooking and people. I mean, it really felt like 4th of July, all American. You can see the bunting draped, just beautifully wrought small town America. And I identify with that kind, even though I'm from Washington and not New York. It just felt like home in a lot of ways. So I really, really enjoyed this book, and it was really fun to watch Roxy accept that what she wants in life is not what she always thought, and that making a change is okay. Great book. Can't wait to read the next book in the series, because the way this one goes about, you could figure out who the next characters for the next 2 books are, and I definitely want to read these. Can't wait. Next up, I read All About Trust by D.P. Denham. This was a book written for the romance group's Love is an Open Road. Basically, the way this event works is that members of the group submit prompts, and then authors pick those prompts and write a story based on the prompt. This prompt was really sweet. This story was really fantastic. I did give it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It is a story of trust. In this story, Marcus is volunteering at a local hospital as penalty for misbehaving in the eyes of his family. He knew what he did was wrong. It was a stupid prank and ended up kind of dishonoring his family a little bit, and honor is a big deal in their family, that Asian family structure. And so in order to make penance to his grandfather, he has agreed to volunteer his time at the local hospital. So he's been reading to some of the patients, and his most recent patient has been an unconscious John Doe, and something about the man is really intriguing to Marcus. And when the boy wakes up, he starts to discover more about Eric. And Eric really won't talk to anyone. He's been completely abused. And what we know is that Eric was in a really abusive relationship that was BDSM gone wrong, and the guy almost killed him. And it was what Eric thought he needed and deserved, because he was kicked out of his house for being gay. He's been on the streets and been prostituting himself to survive. And every place he's gone to for help has condemned him essentially for being gay. So he really trusts no one at this point. And Marcus is wanting to step in and help is very hard for Eric to understand and accept. Marcus, on the other hand, comes from a wonderful family. They own a coffee shop, and the whole family kind of works for the coffee shop, and they're looking to expand. And so Marcus talks to his parents about trying to find a way to help Eric, and they bring him into the coffee shop to work and give him a job and try to reach through the walls that Eric has erected to protect himself and show him that not everyone in the world is nasty and awful. And this story is just really beautiful, really slow-moving, not slow-moving story in that nothing happens, but slow-moving in the way that they handle Eric and trying to show him that the world is a better place than he sees it. And this story does not go too far. It really allows Eric to be this traumatized person and to slowly be brought to trusting a few people. And as much as Marcus is falling for Eric, he never pushes into Eric's space, and I really, really appreciated that about this story. I had one teensy tiny complaint about the story, and it's a plot point that I don't want to give anything away. If you're really curious, in my review, I did leave it under spoilers. And it was a small thing, and it was just the one thing that would have taken it over the top to being really wonderful for me. And I just felt it was something that was kind of owed to Eric. It didn't take away from the story as a whole, really. It's just that my own personal want for every little thing to be perfect would have loved to have. So really well written, really beautiful story of one person reaching out and showing someone else that the world is a better place than they imagine and that they will be there for them. So lovely, really wonderful. And my last book this week was Connection Error by Annabeth Albert. This was the 3rd book in her Gamers series. I've been looking forward to reading this book because I've really, really enjoyed this series a lot, and I was not disappointed. This may be my favorite one in the series so far. I did give this book 5 stars. In this story, you have video game programmer Josiah Simmons. He is young, a genius, but he struggles with ADHD, and distractions are really difficult for him, and he's just been put in charge of his first big project for the game that he is a part of developing. It's one of the biggest games on the planet, and everybody knows it, and he doesn't want to let his bosses down, and he's flying to Germany to take over his new department and get the programmers there going. He gets on the plane and is seated next to Ryan Orson. Now, Ryan is an injured Navy SEAL. He is headed back to DC to continue his physical therapy and trying to get back to active duty. Josiah is geeky and cute and adorable and doesn't notice a lot of what's going on with Ryan right off the bat, and is one of those people that has very little filter between what he thinks and what he says. And Ryan is slightly traumatized and really struggling to get over these injuries. He's lost a finger, he has major scarring, and what Josiah doesn't notice right away is that Ryan's lost both of his legs, and he is headed back to Walter Reed to be fitted with his prosthetics so that he can hopefully walk again. with these new legs. I loved this story. I loved Josiah's innocence and sweetness and his just open nature, and Ryan's damaged soul and hurt and struggling to deal with this massive injuries that he has suffered, and what he wants and what the next step forward is for him. They are so cute together and just really loving and caring, and it sneaks up on Ryan. He doesn't want a relationship, and Josiah does, but doesn't expect to get it from somebody like Ryan. And through their gaming and through their nightly talks, they really start to develop this relationship, and it's really, really wonderful. So well written, just very sweet and caring. I love this series. I love the little bit of geekiness about it. I'm a total dork, and I don't care, and I love me my gaming, and it's just really entertaining series. It was a fantastic read, and I continue to hope for more in this series from Annabeth Albert because I like her writing style. It's definitely full of joy and sweetness and caring and hope, and it just makes me happy to read, and I really enjoy that in my romance books. They just, at the end of the day, I want to walk away with a smile on my face, and I always do with her books. So a really great find as an author. Wonderful contemporary romance, and I'm so happy I read it. Overall, this was a really good reading week for me. I had a lot of books I really, really enjoyed, and that certainly was helpful with the new work schedule and just getting settled into how things are going in these late nights and closing. So great way to end a month, really, because I've only got like 3 days left that have not been accounted for in a week in review. So just really, really happy with this week. I enjoyed my books. They were wonderful reads, and I can't wait to see what November has in store for me. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think of any of these books if you've read them. I hope you have a wonderful week as well and a great Halloween in October. Have a great day. Bye!